Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt. I just wanted to put together a quick little video for you talking about validity and soundness so that you can all have a foothold as we move forward. So typically I'll ask you for the definition of validity and the definition of soundness, say on an exam. So make sure that you know this definition cold. You should be able to reproduce it verbatim, right? Define valid. An argument is valid if and only if the premises, you can say it several different ways, guarantee the truth of the conclusion, or you can say the conclusion is true if the premises are true, or another kind of way to put it would be it is not possible for the premises to be false if, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, you could put it that way, but that's a little convoluted. We'll just leave it at 2. I'm not going to torture you. And then remember, soundness is got 2 parts. The argument has to be valid, and the premises have to actually be true. So an argument is sound if it is valid and the premises are actually true, right? Whether they happen to be true in the real world. Okay, so these are the verbatim definitions. Let me make sure I got it. Is valid if and only if the premises guarantee the truth of the conclusion. Okay, the conclusion is true if the premises are true. Those are fine. Okay, and then define soundness. Remember, it has 2 parts. The argument has to be valid and the premises are actually true. So let me give you a few examples with a model answer here to start, just so we can, and then we'll talk through the rest so you kind of get a picture of what we're dealing with. Okay, so remember, I'm going to ask you something like, are the following arguments valid and are they sound? Okay, so here it is. Three sentences. It's got 2 premises and a conclusion. If Barack Obama is human, then he will die. Barack Obama will not die, thus Barack Obama is not human. The question is this argument valid? This argument is in fact valid, and the way that I know that is if 1 and 2 are true, they force 3 to be true. In other words, if Barack Obama will not die, then he wouldn't be human, because what it is to be human, at least in part, is to die, right? And so you would argue, just point that out. That is, if Barack Obama will not die, he will not be a human being. This argument is, and now, so we've done validity, but remember you got to finish and do the next part, which is soundness. This argument is not sound because Barack Obama will actually die. Perhaps it's possible that Barack Obama will not die, and we do not yet know the truth of 2, but generally it's considered that he will die, right? So the idea here is we would normally consider 2 right here excuse me, this argument is not sound. We would consider this argument to be not sound because 2 would be false, right? In other words, Barack Obama is going to die one day. We all are, right? We all kind of understand that on some level, and so we would argue that in this case 2 is false, right? Because 2 is false, this cannot be a sound argument. Say, yeah, but 2 is generally considered false. I clarified that last point there. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. This argument is valid because if 1 and 2 are true, they guarantee 3 to be true. In other words, if it's true and 2 is true, meaning Barack Obama really is human, and if you're human, then you'll die, and it turns out he won't die, well, then it turns out he's not going to be human. Okay, let's work just a few more. This one here, let me change this numbering for just a second. This looks a lot like the first one, but it's different, and I did that on purpose. So be careful. You may think you see an example that you recognize from here, but maybe I've changed it a little bit. It'll still be substantially the same question, the same problem. It'll just be a little different. Okay. If Barack Obama is human, then he will die. Barack Obama will die, thus Barack Obama is human. Okay, you might look at this and say, oh yeah, this is just like the first argument, but it's actually not. This argument is not valid, right? And it's a little trickier. The argument form is not exactly the same. Here I'm saying, if Barack Obama is human, then he will die. Barack Obama will die, thus he's human. But there are a lot of things that are human, or that are not human, that die, right? You know, moss dies, but it's not human. So just his mere dying alone will not make him human. So it's not valid, and it's not sound. Okay. I'm not going to type out the answer again, but it would, you know, approach or approximate or be a lot like this one. Okay. This one requires a little bit of math. The U.S. Congress has more members than there are days in the year. Thus, you probably hear my son in the background. Go with it. The U.S. Congress has more members than there are days in the year. So in other words, there are 365 days in the year, but there are like 400 some odd members of Congress. And so at least 2 members of Congress have the same birthday. That has to be true. That is correct. So there's no way for, this argument is valid because there's no way for 1 to be true and 2 to be false. Similarly, it turns out to be actually true. Now, you know, this is an example where you have to know that this is sound, but given that I am presenting this material to you, you know, you have to know that the U.S. Congress has more members than there are days in the year. But there won't be anything new like that, right? I'm just telling you that for purposes of a problem like this, assume that U.S. Congress has more members than there are days in the year. And I can even designate for you guys, like, consider this is true. That's probably the best way to do it. That's how we'll handle it. Okay, all humans have 3 heads. Professor Vitt is a human, thus Professor Vitt has 3 heads. Okay, this argument is actually valid, right? In other words, if all humans had 3 heads and I was a human, then it would follow that Professor Vitt has 3 heads. So that's valid. It turns out to be not sound. So we know it's valid, but it's not sound. We know it's not sound because all humans don't have 3 heads, right? And then similarly, you may argue that I'm not a human, but you'd be wrong. Okay, so that's it. So that one is valid, but it's not sound. And it's not sound because the premises aren't actually true because 1 is false. All humans don't have 3 heads. All right, we have, I think, 2 left. Yeah, so let's do this one. All community colleges with low tuition are either schools with large enrollments or institutions supported by taxes. Thus, all community colleges are institutions supported by taxes. This is false, right? Or excuse me, I don't want to say that. I put it in the proper way. This argument is not valid, okay? And it's not valid because 1 does not entail 2. In other words, all community colleges with low tuitions are either schools with large enrollments or they're institutions supported by taxes. But it doesn't follow that all community colleges are supported by taxes, right? Because it says here that they are either supported by taxes or they have large enrollments. So it could be that there's this other option lurking out there. So this argument is not valid. And for soundness, it's a great question. If it's not valid, it's not going to be capable of being sound, right? So you don't have to worry about it. So you don't even need to address whether or not 1 is going to be true because it's not relevant whether or not it's actually true. We know if it's not valid, that alone will make it not sound. Last one, here we go. Blissfully, I'm sure, you think. All merchandisers that are retailers are businesses that are inventory rotators. And thus, all merchandisers are inventory rotators. Okay, for those of you not possessing the MBA, this just requires a little bit of attention. Think about what it says. It says all merchandisers that are retailers are businesses that basically rotate inventory. Fair enough, but from that, it doesn't follow that all merchandisers are inventory rotators because this first sentence is qualified. It says all merchandisers that are retailers, boom. But down here, so that's just for retailers. But over here, then they're including all merchandisers, including non-retailers. So this argument is not valid. And consequently, it's not sound. And it's not valid because 1 does not entail 2, because 2 is talking about all merchandisers, and 1 is only talking about those merchandisers who are retailers. Okay, you guys, if you get those down, you should be in good shape for the first exam.